Heavenly Father, I just thank you so much for this time together. I thank you for the people that have come before us. And I pray, Lord, that as we learn how to learn more about them, you would just open our hearts and minds to the stories that you have to tell about the way you work in the world through others. I pray, Lord, that you be with Irene and that you give her the words to say, and that we would all benefit from this time to your glory. This I ask in your name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, Irene, I'll let you take it away.
All right. Well, I'm Irene Walters. I'm one of the librarians here at the Clayton Library Center for Genealogical Research in Houston. And we are the genealogy collection of Houston Public Library. And you'll hear just a little bit of this again on my first couple of slides. But we are in the Museum District of Houston, and we're one of the largest genealogy libraries in the country. So we collect for every state, not just Texas, and we can help you find your ancestors. We are open Tuesdays through Saturdays, 10 to 4. So, and tonight's talk is tips and tricks for genealogy. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And it is that one. Share. And my slideshow. Come on, from the beginning. There we go. All right, it's entitled Genealogy Tips and Tricks, Finding Someone by Not Using the Known Information. And I'm Irene Walters, a librarian too, and Clayton Library is one of the special collections of Houston Public Library. We have 3, the Clayton Library Center for Genealogical Research, the Houston Metropolitan Research Center, which is our Texas and local history special collection, and the African American Library at the Gregory School, which is our African American collection. We do have a Hispanic collection that is part of the Houston Metropolitan Research Center, or HMRC. And one day we're hoping with Houston Public to actually build or start a Hispanic research collection in its own building. So as I said, I work for Clayton Library. We're part of Houston Public Library, and Houston Public Library's mission statement is "We link people to the world." And Clayton Library's unofficial slogan is "We are linking you to the world of your ancestors." So, genealogy tips and tricks. In genealogy or family history research, we usually start with how to find someone, and the normal strategy is starting with what you know, who you're looking for, their name, where you're looking for them, their place of birth, their marriage, their death, their residence, their burial location, what place are you looking for information about them in that place, and when did they live? What are their, dates of birth, marriage, and death? Those are the normal how to find someone, things that you're looking for. But what if the normal doesn't work? That's the tips and tricks that I'm going to be going over tonight. I'll be talking about name searching, location searching, date searching, and additional search strategies such as using other family members, neighbors, and gender to find someone. So we're going to start with name searching. So when you are doing genealogy, a lot of times you have to think of alternate spellings for your ancestors' names, because our ancestors' names were not always, were very seldom actually written down by themselves. They were written down by other people, and so they get misspelled quite often. And the first different spelling that we look for under alternate spellings is a spelling that was actually changed by the ancestor, him or herself, because they did change them themselves. The first name we're going to look at here is a Franklin C. Walter joining the U.S. World War II Army. And he was born in 1916. He joined on April 30th, 1941. And his twin brother, Frederick W. Walters, yes, his brother did not use the same last name as his twin, joined April 17th, 1941. So the last name in the family was Walter, but Frederick decided it sounded better with an S. And if he thought the same way as my dad, because my dad's birth last name, I have his birth certificate, is Walter. And my dad said, well, everybody misspelled it and put the S on it, and it sounds better with the S on it. So he started putting the S on it himself in 8th grade. So about half the family, half of my relatives go by Walter and half go by Walters. Other alternate spellings can be spelling changed by people who surround the ancestor. My sister-in-law's great-grandfather was John Kravatsky on the 1920 census with his wife and first daughter. Then on the 1930 census, his name is John Kriwauchka. The Kravatsky, we believe, is because he had just come over from Austria just a few years before 1920 and was trying to pronounce his name, probably speaking almost only Austrian, to a census taker, and the census taker just wrote the parts that he thought he heard. Kriwauchka was supposed to be what the last name was, and so by 1930, John knew more English and could say what his name was to the census taker. But by 1940, he's on as John Kriwaks, and his name actually did get changed to Kriwaks. The family story that my sister-in-law told me was that John worked in the woods as a lumberjack, and his boss went to pay him one week and goes, John, how's that your last name go? Kriwa, oh, the heck with it. I'm just writing Kriwaks, and wrote his check out to John Kriwaks. And John decided that that was a good name. So, and probably very few people were getting it right anyway. And so he did change it to Kriwaks. And when you are looking for names of people who changed their names after they came to America, John, in his naturalization, he actually got his name changed legally from Kriwauchka to Kriwaks for his naturalization. Other alternate spellings can be a disagreement, even within the family, on how the name is spelled, such as this Brio with a T versus Brio without a T. These are the signatures on my great grandparents' wedding marriage certificate in France. The bride, Barbara Brio, spelled it with a T, and her brother, Jean Brio, you can see the Jean there, he did not put a T on his version of the name and his signature. Alternate spellings, such as Latinized versions of the name spelled by priests if you have Catholic ancestors, or ancestors in any Christian church where they wrote the names, wrote the information in any other language. You can have the names changed by the priest or the preacher, because they did not ask people how to spell their names necessarily. They wrote down what they thought they were hearing, and with the Catholic Church writing the names in Latin, a lot of times they just kind of wrote it the way they thought it might get put in Latin. So John Michael Buckingham, who was from France, and was probably Joan or Jean even. Michael Buchenham got his name spelled quite a few different ways, and these were all the different spellings I found on his children's baptism records. So almost every child looks like it has a slightly different father because of the name change. And when I add that to the mother's last names or mother's names, first and last names on those, they really I think there might be 2 children out of like 12 that have exactly the same names for the father and the mother on them. You can get Americanized versions of the names. Nicolas Lallier, his name in records in America is Nick, N-I-C, N-I-C-H, and Nicholas, and then Nicola or Nikolai, and then the Lallier with 1 L, 2 L's. I've also seen it with a Y in it instead of I-E-R. So they get changed around depending on how they're heard. You can also have the best guess by a record creator, such as Catherine Kirschner. On her children's baptism records, the priest was not sure if it was Catherine with an A or an E in the middle. How did it end with an A, A-E-E? And Kirschner, or was it Catherine with a K even? Or in Kirschner, they really did not know how to spell it, which is kind of funny because in the county, the town next to, it's more of a village next to the village that the church was in is named Kirshnerville after Catherine's father. So you'd think since a town was named after them, they'd get it right. Other misspellings is how is the name normally spelled? Carl Walters falls with limb of tree into Black River. Well, that's my dad as a child. And at this point in his life, he was not adding the S, but the newspaper man went and added the S to it. So it was Carl Walters instead of Carl Walter. It can go, the name be a typo, such as Pearl C. Walter and Sherman S. Hoagles left Monday for Detroit. This is my grandfather, whose name was not Pearl. His name was Verl with a V. And I've seen it as Pearl, and I've also seen it as the misheard or sounds like Burl. So Burl C. Walters with Corinne, which is funny because they got my grandmother's name spelled right. And then my dad as Burl C. Walters. And then Merlin, who's my Aunt Merlene, and Muriel. And sometimes you just have bad handwriting. That very first name right there, Katie Lallier, that is a perfect capital L in the handwriting of Lewis County, New York. It looks like Salyer, but for some reason I've seen a lot of different people write it in different books, so I know that they are different people writing it. And it looks like a capital S instead of a capital L. Now, you can also use what's called Soundex to find people when you're doing genealogy. Soundex is a sound-based indexing, so Soundex. It brings like-sounding names together, no matter how they're spelled, as long as they have the right first letter. So Nicholas Liller, Nicholas Lallier, L-O-L-Y-E-R, and Nicholas Lallier, and Nicholas Lallier. This is Nicholas and Catherine Lallier on 4 different census records with 4 different spellings of the last name, but it's the same couple over the years. You can have people with using their initials, and when you have that it can get harder to find people, but you do have to remember to look for them using their initials. So search both with and without initials. So William F. Walter versus William Walter. That's my great grandfather, and he almost always wrote his own name as William F. And most things I find him on as William F., such as this piece from the newspaper when he bought a residence on Cascade Ave in Lowville, New York. He's William F. Walter. Then, unfortunately, when he died, went in the newspaper as just William Walter. So everything else has always been William F., and his obituary is just William Walter. Sometimes with people with initials, you need to search the initials, both initials, instead of him or her actual name. Mr. Anthreus Burns Gaylor apparently really didn't want to be called Anthreus Burns very often. So almost everything in his life, his name is written as A.B. Gaylor, such as this census record. And my friend whose ancestor this is, it took her a long time to find out that A.B. Gaylor was Anthreus Burns Gaylor. It took her years of research to get it to find something that actually had his name as Anthreus Burns to figure out what the AB stood for. Now, middle names. Anytime you know someone's middle name, you should try searching for someone with it, especially men, because a lot of times that's what they use instead of their first name. So Carl Walters, age 9, son of Verl Walters, amused himself in climbing a tree. This is the little headline about Carl Walters falling with limb of tree into the river. This is my dad. And because he was Verl Carl Walter Jr., and Grandpa was Verl Carl Walter, in the family we called Grandpa Verl and my dad Carl, and then my oldest brother, who is Verl Carl Walters the third, because dad started adding the S, so all of us kids have the S. My brother has always gone by Bucky. So with family stories, I have stopped people a couple of times going, okay, wait a minute, you said Carl, are you talking about dad? Or are you talking about grandpa? Or you said Verl, are you talking about dad or grandpa? Because after grandpa died, then some of the people started calling dad Verl more often. Other middle names are, for women, their maiden name gets used as their middle name, and their middle name a lot of times just kind of drops out of sight. So Rita Thabalt Dumond, Thabalt was her maiden name, and here in her funeral notice, you see there's no middle name for her, just her maiden name as her middle name.
That happened to me. I didn't have a middle name, so I took my last name, a maiden name, as my middle name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it can happen with people who have a middle name too, and it just nope, they flip it and use it the other way. So you have to play with them and look for it. So it can be either way. So using nicknames. So you want to look for people with the common nicknames, such as Frank for Franklin, Wally for Walter, Bill and Will, and Billy and Willie, all for William. So Mrs. Frank Walter of Watertown. So his name was Franklin. Sometimes you have nicknames that are locally common, such as Laney for Magdalena in Lewis County, New York. So George, that's supposed to be Kirshner. It says Kisnu or Kernu. His wife was Magdalena, and then and he is my ancestor. And then right next door to him was John Bush, who's my great grandpa. And his wife, I saw that and I thought, well, what did they write Laney or Looney for? Because his wife was Barbara. And then I stopped and looked at my records and went, oh, because his wife Barbara had died like 2 years before the census, and he got remarried, and he did remarry a woman whose name was Magdalena. So it's Laney, and it looks like Looney on the census here, but Laney is our, instead of Magda or Maggie, it's Laney. Other common nicknames can be a variation of the middle name, such as Clarissa Elander Sarton. She went by Ellen. She didn't even like, she didn't like her first name, and she didn't really like her middle name, but she decided she liked an Ellen for the middle name better. And that's what she went by. And then she got remarried and became Clarissa Elander Bowling, and she even flipped her name around and used Ellen C. Bowling as her name. And I have an aunt who did that, and she didn't do it herself. When she was a baby, she was baptized Gertrude Margaret, and somebody said to my grandmother, "Oh, dirty Gertie," and my grandma got very mad and said her name's Margaret. And so her whole life, my aunt went by Margaret, and then she went by Margaret Gertrude, and acted like the Gertrude was her middle name until she started getting Social Security, and had to show her birth certificate, which said Gertrude Margaret. And so it's like, oops, you have to be careful these days. Before computers, you didn't have to be as careful with your name. And I had a coworker that retired from here, and her family had done the same thing. She had always gone by her middle name. And when she went to retire, she actually, luckily her mom was still alive when she went to retire, and she had to have her mom do an affidavit that yes, her name was this, and because she had been putting into Social Security and working as her middle name, and it was like, well, wait a minute, no, her name, that's not her name. So it can mess you up. Unusual nicknames. Sometimes you can find people using their unusual nicknames, such as my dad's nickname was Gutsy. He got it in high school from getting knocked out in a football game in high school, and woke up after they carried him off the field, and he wanted to go back in, and they said, "Oh, that takes guts." So he became Gutsy, and it actually got in the newspaper a bunch of times actually, and I was able to find it by searching for Gutsy Walters, and this time it's in as Verl Gutsy Walters. And then another time they're talking about him in the paper, and he's just Gutsy Walters. And he was so known by that we actually had to put it in his obituary so that people would realize who it was that had died, because there was a lot of people. I could go someplace and be talking about who I was, and I'd say I was Verl Walters' daughter, Carl Walters' daughter, and then I would just roll my eyes and go, Gutsy. Oh, I know Gutsy. And it's like, yeah, nobody, a lot of people didn't know him by any name but Gutsy. Another type of name variation are Deet and Nee names. Deet names are ones that you're also known as. So Mary Ida Amen Deet Le Alamand. The name, depending on where you are in Wisconsin and Canada, can be Amend or Le Alamand. So on this record, it's going by both, but on some records, she would be Mary Ida Amend, and some she'd be Mary Ida La Alamand. Nee names are that somebody was formerly known as that. So with women, Nee usually means their maiden name. So Frances Bannerman Nee Kendrick in this record in Ancestry. And you can also have Nee names occasionally for guys where they change their names. So people are saying that this person used to be known by this name. You get for guys, you get deet a little bit more, way more than you do knee. The knee is almost always for a female, and it actually comes from uh, the word knee in French, which it stands for, that you're going to say the person's maiden name. Sometimes, though, when you're searching for people, you have to ignore the name altogether when searching. And in the computer databases, most of them, you can leave out the name, leave the last or first name out, or both out altogether. And as long as some of the databases, as long as you have something in one field, you're okay. But you could leave either the first or last name out and search for my great great grandpa, Benjamin Hogels. I could not find him in the 1850 census indexes. And he should have been in Lewis County, and he had his wife, his son Alfred, who I descend from. And they had been living in Martinsburg in 1860. So as I went back to 1850 to search for him, I tried let's go for just Benjamin in Martinsburg, Lewis County, New York. And I came up with these Benjamins, and the one that's Benjamin Hydes, born about 1802, looked right. So I clicked on it, and the family was Benjamin, Effa, Joseph, Caroline, Eliza, Lucy, and then Alfred. And Benjamin, Effie, and Alfred were all the right ages. Eliza was on the 1860 census, and she was the right age. The other children, Joseph, Caroline, and Lucy, were not on 1860. So everybody was the right age, and I'm like, yep, that's got to be them. When I looked at the census, yes, it really does say Hydes, and I got to thinking about it, and that the census taker probably wrote his first copy of the census as he walked around, and then when he got back home and was copying them out, he couldn't read his own handwriting and turned Hogels into Hydes, because you go up and down in the same places on those two names. And so he turned OG L into YD. He had smushed it together probably. And since this handwriting is very nice and pretty, to me, it tells me this is the one he wrote sitting down nicely at a table with his candle and everything else there and able to do it. So it's got to be the copy. If the handwriting is crappy, that's the first copy that's done, and is slightly more accurate on that. But usually and most things, you only have one copy made. And in genealogy, you learn very quickly that crappy handwriting is the norm. So like I said, sometimes you have to ignore the last or first name when you're searching. So I searched the 1850 census for Benjamin Hogels, and instead of finding Benjamin Hogels, I found the family as Benjamin Hydes. And I have since found out that poor Joseph there, the oldest boy in the household, wasn't even a Hogels anyway. He was a Turner. He was Effie's son from her first marriage. So didn't even get that right. And I don't know which one Caroline is, if she's from the first marriage or if she's from the second one. Because after this record, the only time I find her is as a married woman. Also, when you are looking for people, big tip on finding people is to check every index you can for those records. This is a 1920 Soundex for New York State. And as I said, Soundex is a sound-based index. Well, they had specific indexes created for some of the censuses that they called sound decks, and there's a card for each family in the census. And the head of household's names at the top. And so for everybody in the 1920 census across the country, there's a card for each household. Frank L. Bush is my great grandfather. And so I found him in the Soundex, the microfilm of those cards here at Clayton. When I went to the census, I was looking for him in New York State, Lewis County, Enumeration District, or ED 69, sheet 1. Well, when I got to the census, it started in ED District 69, sheet 2. Sheet 1 was the very first page of the county, because he was in the town of Krogan, which alphabetically is the first town in my county. And apparently over the years in between when they created the Soundex in the 1930s, and when they microfilmed the Soundex and the census, page 1 came loose and came out. And so when I look at the census, the very first family I find is the 18th family of the that the census taker came to, by Vida Wolf. And it says Vida Wolf daughter. So she's the only person out of her family on the census, because her family was on the bottom of the page before, and my Frank L. Bush and his family is not even on the census because along with Vida's family and the other people they're gone. That's 100 people gone from the census because the census page is gone, but they're all in the Soundex somewhere. Another type of searching is combining names to search. So I had a patron who asked me to help her find her ancestor, and the last name was supposed to have been changed at some point from Kozalinki to Cozy, and she couldn't find her family. And so we were looking in the 1940 census for them, and she knew that the father in the family was named Andrew, and that his daughter was Beverly, who was born about 1938 in Summit County, Ohio. Well, so I put it in looking for a Beverly born about 1938, and put it in that they were living in Summit County, Ohio, and put father's name Andrew. If I didn't find it with this, I would have gone back and tried Andy to see if I could find it, but I didn't have to, because here it came up, a Beverly Jane Rosie, and Andrew and Suzanne were the parents. And so she was found as Beverly Rosie instead of Cozy. So the census taker just kind of made too big of a loop or on his handwriting there, and it turned it into Rosie. So name searching and genealogy, we went over quite a few different versions and different things that you have to remember, and try all of them to find your ancestors. Now, location searching. Try to put in, if you know it, the place of birth for someone. So I have my mom's whole side is from France, and they moved to Lewis County, New York. And so every so often on things like a census, I will put in just give me in this year the people born in France who are living in Lewis County, New York, so I can play with it. And I get answers such as this, the very first one here, a George Bexio living in Krogan, born in France about 1819. There's no Bexios in Krogan, New York. That is a indexer's guess at the crappy handwriting of Brio. And some of the census takers and some other people write the Brio instead of the BRIOT as BREO or BREOT. And so the X is the crappy R. Other searches you can do is by last known address. So when I was looking for my Benjamin Hogels, I was looking for him in Martinsburg, Lewis County, New York, because I knew that's where they were in 1860, 1870, and actually even 1860, 1870, 65, and 75, because New York State has state censuses. So I'd found them there quite often. But where were they in 1850? I thought, well, let's try Martinsburg. And then sometimes you need to look at your ancestors' neighbors' home, state, and country, such as our Nicholas Lallier, born in France, and John Bush, born in France. Are they from the same area of France, different area of France? Well, this is a case of people from the same place basically moving together, because John Bush and Nicholas Lallier are born in the and got married in the exact same town in France. So, and Nicholas's, let's see, that Nicholas's wife was born in that town, and John Bush's first wife, because this is him with his second wife, was born in that town in France. So when I found one, I was looking around at the other people in the records, and I found the other. I found my Bush first, and then I found my Lallier. Place of birth and last known address. So I could not find that John Kriwauchka, John Kriwaks, his daughter Nellie. I couldn't find her living with her dad in the 1840 census, and I wasn't sure if she'd already gotten married or maybe moved somewhere else, was living in some other part of the county. So I was like, okay, well, Nellie was born in Boston, Massachusetts, and she was living in Lewis County in 1930, and 1925, she was living in Lewis County. Let's see if she's in Lewis County in 1940. So I put her down, born in Massachusetts, living in Lewis County. Well, I got this index record, but it says her home in 1940 was in the town of Brighton in Monroe County, New York. But 1940 was nice. They asked, where did the person live in 1935? And Nellie lived in Glenfield, New York, which is Lewis County. So I was able to find her, and she was still Kriwaks out in Monroe County. She had not gotten married yet. So Massachusetts, Glenfield, that's where it came from, and that she was living in Monroe, which is where Rochester, New York is. Now, sometimes people's places in their family, their story of their life, it changes because the map changes. So the war in the 1800s in Europe changed this Frenchman, Nicholas Klein, who was born in France according to the 1860 census. By the 1880 census, he was a German. He was born in Germany. That's because he was from Alsace and Lorraine, most likely Lorraine, like almost every other Frenchman in Lewis County, New York, was from Lorraine. And in the 1870s, Germany invaded Alsace and Lorraine and declared those regions of France to be German. So this German, or this Frenchman, changed and said, okay, guess I'm from Germany. Some of them, sometimes they don't do that though. It depends on what the nationality and loyalty of the person is. Sometimes though, you have to ignore the home state and country, such as is a daughter's home country different, such as Catherine Lallier. She says she's born in France. Living right next door to her are her parents, George and Lainey or Magdalena Kirschner, who say they're from Germany, and Catherine's younger brothers, Joseph and George, are saying they're from Germany, and her younger sister Mary's from Germany, but they are all from France. But they're from Lorraine again, which Germany invaded. So using location, look for stuff about their place of birth, but don't swear by it that it has to be the state or country that you might know absolutely what it is, but don't swear by it, because sometimes it changes because of the map change, or just because the person answering the question doesn't know, and they know they moved from New York to Texas, and most people know me from Texas. People down here know I've been here in Texas so long, 24 years, that they forget that I'm actually from New York State. So somebody would say, "Where's Irene from?" "Oh, she's from Houston, Texas." And it's like, no, but right now I am, for 24 years. Yeah, I've been from Houston, Texas. Look for them in their last known address, or any address that you have. Sometimes they move back and forth. It's surprising how many go from one place to another and then come back to the original place, then go to another place. It's very surprising. Use neighbors, home, state, and country, because neighbors and friends and neighbors and relatives did move together to for places. Sometimes combine place of birth and last known address to find people. And remember that places can change due to map changes. And again, sometimes just ignore the place, because it's not going to help you. Now, date searching, one of the fun ones. In databases such as Ancestry, you can get stuff like search exactly this age or date, or go plus or minus 2, 5, 10 years. So on like the 1920 federal census, I was searching for my dad, and I put 1916 because that's the year he's born. If I put search exactly this year in 1920 census, it will not find him, even though I know the town or the county he's in. I put it in as Lewis County, New York, because my dad was born April 22nd, 1916, and the census day for 1920 census is April 1st, 1920. So if I put 1916, and you look at the indexes now, my dad was only 3 on April 1st. So when you subtract 3 from 1920, you get 1917. So it would say, the computer will say, no, he is not. We couldn't find anybody born in 1916 with this name and in this place, because the computer subtracted it and said, oh, it's 1917. So pretty much always go at least plus or minus 2. If you are looking for sometimes like specifically that the death occurred in a certain year, like 1942, and you're looking in a death index for that state, yes, you can sometimes put it that it's 1942 and do it exactly. But most of the time, just go plus or minus 2. You don't necessarily get that many extra results to have to wade through. But then sometimes in your age searching, you get some people, sort of women, who lie about their age. But not just women, but women such as Nancy Newman. In 1860, she was 25, living with her mom and stepdad. In 1870, 10 years later, she's still 25. She's Nancy Simons, a married woman, and so, she didn't age. In 1880, she's 35. So she did age 10 years, but she should be 45. In 1900, she's with her second husband, Charlie Horseman. And we know this is her one because we know that Horseman was her husband, but also her son, Johnny Simons, who's the son of her first husband, is there. Or her daughter, Johnny Simons, is there. And Nancy is only 50. So in the 20 years between the 1880 census and the 1900 census, she aged 15 years. 1910 census, she aged 14 years, and between those, she's 64. And then 1920, she only aged 4 years, and she's 68. So she went from 1860 being 25 to 1920 being 68. And over the course of that 60 years, she only aged 43 years and was getting away with it. That's the fun part to
That
me,
is-
is like, wow, how did she get away with it? You know, I mean, she should be 85 and she's saying she's 68. So either she always looked pretty bad or she always looked pretty good.
Well, remember,
I'm chiming in here because my mother-in-law did that.
Oh, yeah.
So the only record that we found that actually had her real age was on her passport. Other than that, she lied by about 10, 20 years, but she got away with it.
Yeah.
Her skin was beautiful. So
Yeah. And they can get away with it because she didn't. Very seldom did you have to show something that was proof of your age. So yeah, you could get away with it quite often.
he also changed
It
husbands.
makes for a good story. Yeah. Go on,
Yeah.
Susie.
Yeah.
She also changed husbands.
Yeah, Nancy changed husbands, so she got away with it even better that way. So sometimes, though, dates can be off because of the transcription. It might not be that the person lied or even misspoke, but they can be off in the transcription, such as this George Kirshner, who's born about 1840, but according to the index on Ancestry, he came to America in 1811, well before he was even born or before his mama even thought of having him. When we look at the actual census page, it looks to me like that's supposed to say 1911, but the 9 does kind of look like it could be an 8. So the indexer wasn't looking at what they were typing in and paying attention and saying, and like double checking back and going, oh, he's born about 1840 in this 19, because of the 1920 census saying he's 80 years old. And so he should be not born before 1840. And the 8 in the 80 and the second number in the year of immigration, they don't look like the same thing to me either. So that's why I'm like, no, that's a 9. You have to, some of your indexers are not truly genealogists. Sometimes they hired guys in prison to index some of the stuff, some of the censuses and things like that. So they weren't genealogists paying attention. Also, in your genealogy, relate the date searching. We all do it ourselves. What was happening in our life? How old were we when things happened? Such as when my great uncle William Feely died, I was in elementary school. And I remember, I could always remember I was in somewhere around 2nd or 3rd grade. And so when I was looking for him, it's like, oh, yep, died in 1976. Yeah, that's right. That would be 2nd grade. And I remember walking from the school to the church because the school was just up behind the church for his funeral, and then walking back to school for class. Were your children born, or were somebody's children born? My mom always commented about my grandfathers that my grandpa Walter died when my brother Leo was a baby, and my grandpa Bush died when my brother Jerry was a baby. So Grandpa Bush died in July of 1963. My brother Jerry was born in May of 63. And what was happening in other family members' lives? This is the part of the obit for my great-grandmother, Mrs. Barbara Streif Becker. And I remembered my mom telling a story about at her wedding, somebody not being able to come because they were sick, and they went between the wedding and the reception, or the wedding and actually go and get the pictures taken, and then the reception, to that person's house so that person could see mom in her wedding dress. And mom gave her one of the roses from her bouquet, and it was her grandma, my great grandma. And so she was alive when my mom was married in October of 46, and then she died in March of 47. She just wasn't able to actually come to the wedding. And I knew it wasn't her other grandmother, because her other grandmother lived. My sister Dorothy knew her. My sister's the oldest, and she knew her as a child. So what was happening in the world? Things like the wars, World War I and World War II. We did have drafts for both of those, and we had a draft for the Civil War. And look for people in the newspaper, not just in the actual draft lists, but the draft cards and like that, but the information about the draft is in the newspaper. So my grandfather, down at the bottom of the page, Verl C. Walters, is he signed up for the draft for World War I. My dad signed up for the draft for World War II. Pre-Great Depression hard times, that was when Pearl, or Verl, my grandpa Verl, went to Detroit to go to Michigan State Auto School. That was 1923. It was he was having a hard time doing blacksmithing in the county because there was a lot of blacksmiths. And that was what he learned from his dad. So he decided to go to mechanic school and learn about these new automobiles, and to try to be able to get work. So he left when my dad was a little kid to go do that, and then came back. And it was it was like a 6-month course they could take, and they learned about, I've looked up stuff about it, and it was like at least 20 or 30 different automobiles, different manufacturers and like that they learned how to work on. What was happening in the world? We just had our Hurricane Nicholas come through here. We've lived through Hurricanes Ike and Harvey and Rita and so forth. Well, our ancestors lived through blizzards and hurricanes, and some of those did unfortunately take some of our relatives' lives. The blizzard in January of 1888, which is called the Children's Blizzard, it came up very quickly during a school day. The kids went to school, it was mild, and by lunchtime, the blizzard came up so fast they were dismissing the kids to send them home. This is a teacher, Miss Cora Curtis, in Delmar, Dakota, froze to death while walking home from the school. And she was from Lewis County, New York. It said she boarded near the schoolhouse, but you cannot see 10 feet in one of those awful blizzards. And unfortunately, a lot of kids and a lot of teachers froze to death. Some of them actually stayed at the schools, and they burned all the wood that they could in the school, the stove in the school. And some people still died, even staying at the school, because they just didn't have enough to last through the storm. It was a really, really bad blizzard. So with date searching, plus or minus the date, what was happening in your life, your ancestors' lives, what was happening in the world at large. Think of all those things when you're looking at the dates people lived. And what else can you look for? So what other tips and tricks do I have? Some additional search strategies are look for other family members. Are they living with a cousin, sibling, grandchild, future spouse? I had never heard that my grandfather's cousin, Wilhelmina, lived with my dad's family when dad was a kid, and there she is on the census. Dad never commented about it. I can find Wilhelmina's family, and she's not living with them. She's not living with her parents. So what's going on? And then in this census, Freeman Smith is the head of household. He ran this household, or he was considered the head because he was the only boy in the household, with his mother and a bunch of his sisters. Well, he had a farmhand named Norrie Hanno living with them. Norrie ended up marrying Mabel Smith, and she became Mabel Hanno. And the funny thing about Norrie is this seemed to be his way of finding a wife, because Mabel died because of giving birth to their daughter. And the next census I find Norrie on, he's living with another family, and his second wife was a daughter in that household. Neighbors did marry the boy down the road. Catherine Lallier, the child in the Nicholas and Catherine's household, married Frank Bush down at the bottom of the page. Those are my great-grandparents. And living right next door, Catherine Lallier is living next door to her parents, George and Magdalena Kirshner. So people live next door to each other. Other people that live next door, sometimes you got to really look about it and think about those last names. I did not realize from the obituary of Peter Love, it said he married Miss Eliza Hogels. I knew that. And I kind of ignored the fact that they had a couple of kids. I hadn't really been looking for them. And so then I turned around and was looking at it one day, and I found his obit, and it says, oh, Liza survives with one daughter and one son, Mrs. Minnie King and Herbert Love. So I thought, well, are they still with him in 1880 census? Herbert is, but he's listed as Herman. And living right next door to them is a Minnie King with a husband, Warren King. And then I took a second look and realized that Effie Holden, living there, 80 years old, a grandmother, supposedly the grandmother of Warren King, but really that's Eliza Hogels Love's mom, Effie. And I had lost Effie. I had her, I thought she died before 1880 because I couldn't find her. And there she was living next door with another screwed up last name. And gender, be very careful on some things like gender on records, such as this one, and my arrow's off a little bit. I gotta fix that. Merlin M. Walters' son, that's actually my aunt, Merlene. And then that was one census with the family. And then the 1940 census, my dad, Verl C., is listed as a daughter who's male. And I think on that case, because you can see this little crappy stuff kind of behind him, that what they did was start writing my Aunt Merlene first and then went, oh, no, Verl's the oldest. So they like kind of tried to erase the pen and put my dad down, but they'd already written daughter over there. And then sometimes it's, where does the gender even come from? This index card for the for the Port of New York passenger list says Jean Bush was 24, was female, and came with Barbet. Well, when you look at the actual census, passenger list, Jean Bush and Barbet, he is it's supposed to be 27 on the index card. 27 and 30. He was 3 years younger than his wife, but there is no place on the passenger list that they came on that says if somebody's a male or a female. So you have to I looked at it and I went, well, it's a Jean and Barbie, Barbie. She's supposed to be Barbara. Let me look and see what it is. And yes, they're the right ages. And it's like, yeah, this is just screwed up. So one of the other major tips I have is to review your stuff. Go back over records you found. Did you miss somebody? Does new knowledge shed a different light on previous finds? Is there a new index? Because maybe they're on an index done by somebody else. Every indexer makes their own mistakes. And so if you have stuff done by different indexers, hopefully they make different mistakes. Have more records been released to the public? Have other records been digitized? And ask your questions out loud, whether it's to yourself or to other people, such as me as a librarian, or your friends, relatives, because when you actually say it out loud, sometimes you get something doesn't sound quite right, and you realize that, oh yeah, that I have this backward, or I have it upside down, or whatever. Look for other family members, look for neighbors, ignore gender sometimes. Don't get hung up on it. Same as don't get hung up on color or race. I need to add that in here, I guess, because there's a lot of times that that can be wrong. A census taker or somebody is just copying the same thing down and down, and all of a sudden you have a neighbor who's a different race and they just ignore it as they keep copying because they don't pay attention to the fact it changed. Do a lot of review of your records and ask your questions. And so because if you don't ask your questions, you won't find your your answers or your ancestors. And so this has been Genealogy Tips and Tricks, finding ancestors by not searching the known information. So we have Magic. And I'm Irene B. Walters of Clayton Library in Houston, Texas, in the Museum District. We are open Tuesday through Saturday, 10 to 4, to help you. And any questions? Let me stop sharing. Okay, there. Any questions?
I guess what I'm looking at too is how I organize the information. Are you going to do that in the next presentation?
There'll be a little bit of organization. The next presentation is Tips and Tricks Part 2, getting the most out of your computers. So there is some organization in that, but every genealogist ends up organizing their stuff in their own way. It's kind of whatever makes sense to them. And whatever I separate my stuff by my mom's side and my dad's side. And then I also separate it by what type of record it is, because I have so much. I've been doing this actually since I was about 14 years old, because I used to come home from school and say something about some kid being stupid. And mom would go, you know, you're related to him.
Well,
yeah. And I was like, what do you mean I'm related to this one too? And she goes, yeah. And she'd tell me how. And I'd go to school and the kid would say something stupid again the next day. And I'd be like, you just better knock it off. You know, you're related to me. And they'd be like, how? And I'd be like, ask your mother. Because I could never remember how mom told me they were related. She did these mother things of, well, it's this one and your great aunt did this and did it. And it's like, she couldn't just say your grandpa's little sister is Joe's grandma. No, she had to go around this roundabout way of it. And so I kind of joked that I was doing genealogy in self-defense to see if there was anybody I could talk about, and pretty much found out no, most of the county I couldn't talk about, and or at least most of about 3 towns I couldn't talk about. And my poor nephews and nieces, they really can't talk about anybody because my brother's married into the few families that we weren't related to, that were the other big families. And so, no, my nephews and nieces can't talk about anybody. And so the
I
next
have-
generation after that can't date anybody.
Oh, now I've been using ancestry.com. Is there, you were talking about Soundex, but are there other search engines that work well that?
In Ancestry, when you put the last name in, you hit that where it says for exact spelling, and you get a choice of Soundex. They do Sounds Like, Soundex, and I can't remember the other one in Ancestry.
I guess I never realized it was there. Okay.
Yeah, it's there, that little box that says exact right under the last name.
Okay.
And you can pick, and and then it goes exact and Soundex, exact and whatever, and you can check those. It gives you a better search than just putting the last name in and not checking anything underneath it. For the first name, check the one that says, I usually check the one that says similar, because that will, they actually have played with it in Ancestry where it will search kind of like names, or names that are the most common nickname for something. So it'll search Bill and Billy and Will and Willie for William, and it'll search WM for William, and pull them all up if you say the person's first name is William. Family Search does do, they do Soundex plus Sounds Like. You can't really choose it. It's automatic. The only thing you can choose in Family Search is if you check the box, then it's absolutely exactly what you typed in.
Oh.
And so since a lot of times it's not what you type, what you type in is not exactly the way it comes up. I shouldn't say never. I almost never check the box in Family Search. All of the databases seem to have some variations that you can do like that. So yeah, you just have to look in the help for the different databases and see what they say that you can do. And also watch for, here at Clayton Library, we've been recording our talks, and they're going up on the Houston Public Library's YouTube channel. And we have a specific channel within the YouTube channel, or a specific playlist that is for the history research centers or special collections. I'm not sure which way they're phrasing it right now. And very soon, one I just gave on Ancestry will go up. I gave one on Ancestry and one on Family Search, and they're called Genealogy Online, Ancestry Library Edition, Genealogy Online, Family Search, 2 separate talks.
I think
And I
I've
talk
seen
more
you.
on that.
I think I've already seen you, because I know
Have I?
I was looking on YouTube on how to organize. Because I had things
Okay.
in files, but it needed to be organized. Like, nobody will make sense out of this.
Yeah,
So
yes.
I think I heard you. So yeah.
You might have, at least one of mine is up. I'm not, they're starting to get them, they're going up faster now. It took, the first ones I gave have taken forever to get up, and there's still one from last year that's not up there yet. But the other 2 I just gave in August and the beginning of September, so those will be up.
I'm almost getting to the point where I don't want to find anybody new. Every time I go in, like I don't have much on a person, I go in, and of course there's now a father and a mother listed. So then it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. So it's real fun, but at a certain point, I'm like, I just need to get a handle on it.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's just,
you start separating it and do it by whatever. Like I separate a lot of mine by the record type. So I'll do in the computer, I have a folder for census, and within that I have each census year's own folders. I have not divided those folders within the census of dad's side and mom's side yet. But on other things like newspaper clippings are all, there's dad's side's newspaper clippings, mom's side's newspaper clippings, cemetery records divided by mom and dad. I can't quite divide the census that way because I can have both sides of the family on the same census page. Because I have so much family in Lewis County, and mom's side especially, it was mom was one of 9, her parents are one of 12 and one of 13. The next generation back, was the same type size. My dad's side, there's a few of the families are large like that, so they're on the same census page. So it's you just have to try to work on it. We do have some books on organizing here. There's some that you can get. I think there's some that you can get through the databases that Houston Public Library subscribes to. There's one called Genealogy Connect, and it's got a lot of how-to books, and I think it has some an organizing one in there that you could kind of technically check out and look at and see. So you try that way, see what you can get.
well, it just keeps growing. That's, but it's so much fun because you get to read the wills of someone who lived in the 1700s, the 1800s, and it's just so, make sure that your sister has a horse and buggy, or they talked about bed linens and, their bedding. And I'm like, what is that? That was in their will. So there are some things I just don't understand, but obviously that was important.
Well, some of the stuff like bed linens and like that, some of that could be expensive because if they didn't, depending on where you lived, like if you lived in New York State, we don't grow cotton up there. So cotton was actually was expensive, cotton linens and stuff like that. And you had to buy it. You couldn't make it. We did have sheep, and you could have woolen blankets that you made from your own sheep's wool, but the other stuff was expensive. And then when it's really fun when it actually describes them by color. And it says the red blanket or the blue blanket or whatever, because some of the colors it was so expensive to dye them certain colors that you would get it described that way of a certain color, because that one was more expensive than the one like blue. Indigo is everywhere, grows in almost every climate. And so blue is easy to get. Red came from snails, the cochineal red, and purple was so hard to get that that's why it was royalty and very, very expensive up until, what was it, the mid to late 1800s, anywhere 1850 to 1870. That's when we got a synthetic purple. And that was by accident. The guy was trying to invent something else.
Can I ask you about my father's side? They're from the old country. They're from Scotland. I have I can't get very far with his side at all. Do you have any suggestions on how, and what the other thing I found with them is they all have the same name. So it's very difficult because there's so many Kenneths and Williams, and they probably went by nicknames. I'm not sure, but and they did smell the name purposely sometimes because There's a lot of feuds in the family, I've found, and that's interesting too. So they would purposely go, I am changing the way I spell this name because I don't want to be related to you.
Oh, yeah.
But is there a trick for
what-
getting,
What time period did they come to America?
they came here in the early 1900s.
Okay,
it's fairly recent.
it's more recent. Okay.
Yes.
Look at some of the stuff on Findmypast.com, which is one of the databases the library subscribes to. You have with that one, you have to come in here to Clayton Library to use it.
Okay.
But you can search Find My Past as findmypast.com. You can create a free account for yourself on there, and you can search and get almost to the record, and then like copy down which database you found the names in, and then come in and actually get to the records in here, or you can buy your own subscription to them. And then there's also a thing called Scotland's People. And that's where there's a lot of records for Scotland, because Find My Past is originally out of Ireland, but it's got a lot of stuff for all of the British Isles and the UK. But it doesn't have as much for Scotland as it does for Ireland and England and Wales. But it does have a lot of stuff for Scotland. But try Scotland's People. They had I'm trying to think. It's kind of a database, kind of a website for Scottish material, and you should be able to find some. I have not heard that the Scottish censuses from the 1800s were destroyed, like the Irish ones got destroyed in a couple of different events. Scotland's ones exist. They're just not, I think they're on Scotland's People. They're just not on necessarily on Ancestry and like that. And also we have a huge Scotland section here. A lot more of it's is stuff about the 1800s and people who came. There's a lot about people who came to America during the 1800s. Ones who came in the late 1800s, I'm not as I don't recall as much here, but try those two databases for Scotland.
That, yeah. It's difficult to find them, and I was hoping I tried to, when my aunts and uncles were alive, I really tried to, ask them a lot of questions, but I found, and I would tape them, so I've been listening to the tapes, but when they were going to tell me something juicy, somehow or another, I asked them something else, and so I'm like, oh, you and your big mouth. So yeah, and the family stories are always really interesting. But I'm my mother's side, I'm already gone down to like 1600s, and so I'm like, oh goodness, it just gets really it's interesting. It's fun, but I'm like, oh goodness. I appreciate it. Yeah, I was just trying to figure out how to organize all this stuff. So it's just I've been working on it a lot, but over the years, I think, because you can be up all night working on this stuff. I mean, you get consumed. Susie, are you doing it as well?
I'm doing some. My sister has done most of ours, but I'm doing some more recent things. She's using a different database. She's actually using two. She's did Brothers Keeper since it just started a long time ago and just kept building on that. And now she's trying to move that over into Ancestry. And it's taking a while, and she's the only one that knows how to use Brothers Keeper. She's got so much in it, and that's a problem because she's getting older. And I tried to get her to teach me some when I was up there in Michigan, and she says, no, I won't. I'm thinking it's going to be lost.
Does she print it? I mean, is she printing it?
Brothers Keeper, you just don't print. You get to choose what you want to print. And so I've been getting her to choose some ranges of family and with the members, certain generations, and print them. So at least I have some data. But then I asked her to print some stories, and she's got lots of stories in there. And I said, I'll pay for your ink. I'll pay for the shipping. I'll pay for the paper. Can you print them out? And she says, no, I want a quilt.
Oh dear.
Well,
Yeah, because it's fascinating. I mean,
Now-
I am fascinated by the stories. I really am.
They are great. So
Susie,
she had, I got my,
does it-
I got my sons to call her and say, would you print them? She'll do them for them. So
okay.
we're getting them that way.
Now, does the quilt have to be made by you?
No, my sister is making quilts for her grandchildren and great
Oh, so
grandchildren.
she wants to do quilting instead of
Yeah.
doing the genealogy stuff. Okay.
But
I
the
thought
problem
maybe
is,
she wanted a quilt and then she would give you the data.
no, the problem is
Library.
we're old and we look young, and she's turning 80 this December, and I'm afraid, we don't know what we're doing as we get older. I just don't want her to mess it up too bad.
Yeah.
And it's the stories you want. I mean, the stories are interesting. And I'm always grateful when I see a story or a will of someone in Ancestry. It really tells you so much about their lives. So,
and like you said, the wills are really interesting. Who they leave out is even more interesting.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, I noticed that with one, they were giving like $10 or something, and one kid got $5, and I was like, well, wonder what he did. But I think he was a special needs kid. I really do. As I looked at it more at another will, I think by the wife or the husband, that they would take care of him, so I thought that must be what it was. Because at first you go, what did he do wrong?
We do have a family member that left a wife and 5 kids in Michigan in the late 1800s. No, I guess it was about 1840, and disappeared. We can't find him anywhere.
Well, what I discovered when I was talking about Scotland, my grandfather came over here with his wife and son. She had tuberculosis and she wanted to go back to Scotland and passed away there in Scotland. Well, after she passed away, he came here to the States, left that son in Scotland, and had married my grandmother, and they had 4 children. Actually, only 3 survived. But my aunt, who was the youngest of those kids, did not realize there was a half brother in Scotland until she was in high school. Had no idea. And, I think I found records where he went back, on ships back to Scotland. And I don't think the kids ever knew where he went. I think, how in the world can you go all the way back and your kids had no idea you had a son still in Scotland? And that's the part I can't find. My aunt went back, and I thought I was going to get all that information from her, and I didn't. So I don't know who they are. So it's, and my grandfather actually died in Scotland. He went back, he was in Glasgow. So I have all that information of him being shipped back, his body being shipped back, but I can't get it together. And I was even in Scotland. I went to the Mitchell Library, but they were not helpful at all. They didn't seem like they wanted to help me at all. But I didn't have a lot of information because I didn't know I was going to end up there on that trip. So
Okay.
I don't know how to do it. So that's why I thought maybe I have to go back and hunt that house down or something and find out. But see, that was so long ago. I doubt that anybody would remember.
How about church records in Scotland?
I don't know that I have those, but I think, they were, I don't know. I've got to look more, but I've kind of closed off my dad's side a little bit, and I'm working on my mom's side, because that one's like it's like a bottomless pit. I can't seem to put a closure on that one. I'm on my 3rd notebook. I've got these. This is one that I'm working on. This is just one. See how thick this is?
Oh my gosh.
So I'm trying to organize it by grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents. That's how I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's the right way or not. And then here's the list of my mother's side. Can you see that?
Yeah.
This is how far down I've been able to go. It's just tremendous. discovered a lot about where I've come from. So
That's good.
That's
it's been fun. But I look forward to the next lecture because I certainly don't have a handle on everything. So I
Okay.
feel like I'm just very naive going through this. So, but
All
it's
right.
fun.
All right. Well, it's, like I said, it's getting the most out of our computers, and so databases and using your computer and doing stuff. So it'll be
Well, and
next
when you
week.
were talking about the spellings and everything, I mean, goodness, yes, discovered all that and nicknames and yeah.
Mhm.
So it's quite an interesting journey. Robin, have you been doing any searching?
I have not done
I
any.
think Robin's frozen.
Genealogy. Oh,
Yeah.
am I frozen?
So
Possibly.
anyway, yeah, she
You guys.
has a nice looking face there.
Or she's got a picture of one or the other.
Well, it's good. It's good. All right. Well, okay.
Looking forward to it.
I
Thank you.
know. Me too.
I really learned a lot more that I learned like 7 or 8 years ago, but then I've forgotten. And
Mhm.
now I'm trying to get back in the groove again. And so also some things have changed where things are more available in other areas.
Yeah. As basically every week that I've worked here now 24 years. I just had my anniversary of being here 24 years this month. And every single week now, there's something new out that I learn about that I did not know before. And actually, I learned something new about the databases, or it's like, oh, they changed in this. You can do this now on this one and this and do this. So, but there's new records out. Family Search, the Mormon Church Library in Salt Lake. We just talked about in our staff meeting today that they've actually finished digitizing the microfilm that they have. They have 2.4 million rolls of microfilm, and they have now digitized every image that they are able to digitize. You might not be able to see every single image because there's some restrictions on some of it because of the record holders, but they have finished their digitization. They just now have to finish work. They're working on indexing all of it that you can see.
Well, now I know that there's a family search group in Friendswood that we could go and see. Are
Mhm.
there some in Clear Lake and League City also?
I don't think there is. You can come here also to Clayton Library, and we're an affiliate library with the library in Salt Lake. So there's a bunch of the stuff you can see on our computers that you can't see on from your home computer, but you can also do a lot of it from home. If you go in, create an account for yourself, and you go in, and if the image has a little key above it and it says it's restricted to an affiliate library and a family history center, you can come here to Clayton to see it. If it says family history center, then you'd have to go to Friendswood. I don't think there is one in Clear Lake or League City, but you can actually go on familysearch.org and go into their help screen and say, find family history centers, and it'll show you the list of all of them. And it's like by state and then by town. So it'll show you, but I don't think I've ever heard of one in Clear Lake or League City.
Where, Susie, where is it in Friendswood?
I don't remember the address. I just know how to get there.
It's
I live in Friendswood.
Yeah, it's at the Mormon Church in
Oh, it's at the Mormon Church. Okay.
Yeah, the family history centers are always attached to a Mormon church or an LDS church. So and they're staffed by volunteers, so sometimes they have a lot of hours, sometimes they don't.
Now, they were closed for the summer for research. Are they open now?
Yes, they're supposed to all have reopened because they were They were closed because they were adjusting some stuff with the computer systems that you and computer databases and things that you could do. So they were like kind of doing some stuff of refurbishing within the computers, what you could do. They may or may not have added different computers, but what you could do and be able to get into in the computers, they were changing some stuff. So
Okay.
they've reopened it was a couple of weeks ago they reopened.
I heard it was going to happen around early September, but I didn't know if it finally had opened.
Yep, they did.
Good.
Was that everybody gotten their questions asked and answered? And you asked me earlier, Karen, if I was doing genealogy, and no, I was not really interested in genealogy, but I have to say that the last 2 lectures have left me intrigued. I really like the stories, and I find it fascinating, like the puzzle search for people's names when the names are wrong.
At first that really confused me. I went, oh no, that's not our relatives, because that's not how you spell it. And then you have to realize that so many people back then did not know how to read or write.
Right.
And so you're just at the mercy of how you say it to this person, and they don't know whether they wrote it correctly. And that took me a while to realize that,
Yeah.
And then you see,
Yeah,
so
even
say,
if they could read and write, they weren't necessarily looking at the paper that the person was writing and seeing how the person wrote it. My John Bush, or Jean Bush from France, his marriage record in France, the clerk wrote Jean, B-U-S-H. Jean's dad, who was also Jean, wrote B-U-S-C-H. And my Jean, who was getting married, he wanted to be Jean C. Boucher, B-O-U-C-H-E. And so that's how he signed it. So I have 3 different spellings of Jean Bush on one record because it was 3 different people writing down the name. And it's like, and luckily, since my guy wrote Jean C. Boucher, I actually could find him in some records in America, because his naturalization, that's how he signed it, even though, again, the clerk wrote John Bush. I was like, okay, well, this is my John Bush, not, we used to joke, there were actually 6 John Bushes in Croghan, New York, at the same time in the mid 1800s. And so I found 3 different John Bush naturalizations, and it was like, which one is mine? And once I found out my guy liked to write his name as Boucher, I'm like, oh, this is mine. So these other 2 aren't my guy. This one is my guy. And but I think the poor guy, I think he's buried under Bush, B-U-S-H. So.
Oh.
it's like, putting a puzzle together of many little pieces that don't quite conform, but you have to make them fit, because it does go together. But
yeah,
it's quite interesting. It truly is. And I keep hoping. I opened up one last night and there wasn't a mother and father listed, and I was kind of glad. I was like, oh, good. Because I hate to just let it, I want to keep going, because then I might not be able to get back to that or something, So I'm trying to make some sense out of this. And the other thing is, you want to know if your family members are at all interested in what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I have discovered that my son is interested. And so I'm kind of like knowing that he will hopefully take control of these at some point, all this work you've done. But then I have other relatives that are also doing it. And then one thing about Ancestry, you can share, you can see what they've put in, and then you can decide if that fits your description or not. So it's fascinating, time consuming and fascinating. So, yeah.
Irene, thank you so much for joining us this evening and for leading this class. I was telling them before we started, Karen, that I will be sending the file from Zoom to Amy Iverson. So it'll be posted on the website if you know of anybody that's interested in watching it. It'll be there, and Irene, I'll send you a copy as well. And
Okay.
both of you got the handouts, but they'll also be posted on the website.
Very good. Thank you.
So probably
That's great.
next
And
week.
and Karen, you have the handout for next week also already.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
She sent both of them.
I did. I just
to you.
forwarded it. I was lazy.
Great.
So we will see you back here, same time, same place,
Same channel.
same channel on Thursday next week. I look
Yep.
forward to it.
All right.
All right.
Looking forward to it.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good night.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right.